talking about climate change, about green agendas, about nudge politics. You've got an interesting story from Germany for us, I understand.
I do. Now, it's old news, but the fact that it's old news is interesting in itself because this is big news. The editor-in-chief of Bild, which is the biggest newspaper in Germany, think The Sun.
Yes, Bild Zeitung, I think.
Bild Zeitung, yeah, that's very great. They've covered lots of my work before. I do quite like Bild, but they have made an absolutely extraordinary apology to the children of Germany.
Have they?
Yeah, on the 27th of May, they released a video and an editorial from the editor-in-chief, and he apologised that the country's policy and the media coverage and Bild media coverage had made the children of Germany feel like, I quote, victims of neglect, isolation and loneliness. And he went on to say that what the policy had done was to make them feel like they were a mortal danger to people and that they could kill their grandmother. But this was done not based on any scientific evidence, but on propaganda.
Yes. Well, they weren't the only ones saying that, were they? We were saying that. Our government was saying that too.
They were. And there are some similarities between some leaked papers, which are called the panic papers, between government advisors and scientists asking them to egg up the danger and to make people scared.
Right.
And one of the things they talked about was making children feel like if they went out to play with their children, their friends, they could come home and kill their families. It was an extraordinary admission of trying to make children frightened and guilty. So he's apologised for that. And he's so clear on it. He says that when the state steals the rights of a child like that, it's done them a very grave disservice. And he makes this apology. So it's interesting that it wasn't news over here. And I haven't heard of any other media outlet doing that.
No. It rings a vague bell with me, only in as much as I think I might have read something about it, a little while ago, but certainly nothing big. It was nobody made much of it, I don't think. But I think that's the trouble. When we talk about the government's nudge policy and the kind of reasoning for why they want us to behave in a particular way, it's one thing to influence adults. It's another completely different thing to influence children, isn't it?
Children have been like the victims or the scapegoats, I think, of the whole epidemic. They've really suffered enormously. And their emotional well-being should have been an absolute priority, and it wasn't. I think, you could apply perhaps a cynical interpretation to his apology, but to me, I thought it was refreshing and it was brave and I respect it. And I would love to see politicians and editors acknowledge if they did something wrong.
We hear about Matt Hancock possibly trying to make himself, a comeback of one kind or another. I don't think anybody, one, should allow that to happen, but two, if he was ever going to be given any kind of public forum again, I think he should be made to apologise for some of the things he said, because he said that you don't want to kill your granny. That was one of his phrases.
But do you remember his apology when he left his role?
Well, it wasn't an apology, was it?
He basically gave himself a massive pat on the back while apologising. Have you ever seen an apology where somebody says what a great job they've done?
Oh, I know. And he was making out that if it hadn't been for him, we'd never be in the situation we're in. And it was like, well, hang on a minute. You were spending a lot more time doing something we didn't know you were doing for a start. This working day and night thing meant something completely different to him. And so, whether he had been the health secretary or not, we would still be where we are, wouldn't we?
And it wasn't an apology. The editor-in-chief's apology for Bild is an apology. What I'd like to know is if their coverage has changed since then. And not being a German speaker, I'm not sure.
No.
But I'm quite curious. I'm going to go and have a look and see what they've been saying about children.
Well, we've got some listeners in Germany, so maybe they'll get in touch with us and tell us. So that would be a good place to start. Well, excellent. Well, we shall see you next week, and perhaps there'll be an update on the Bild Zeitung scenario. I just quite like saying that. I'm not very good at German, but I quite like saying things in German. Laura Dodsworth, thank you very much indeed. Writer, author, filmmaker. We should talk sometimes about some of the films and some of the other stuff you've done, but there's never time.
There's never time. There's too much news. The news just keeps... It's the gift that keeps giving every day.
It does. People say to me, how do you always find something to talk about? I'm like, don't worry. Don't worry. We'll do that. We'll have that. State of Fear is the book, of course, how the UK government weaponised fear during the COVID-19 pandemic.